through the smoke, cause the wicked hide behind the cloak. And if you stay in the mist, you gon' be soaked. So listen up, cause this hair of the dog, what's real, what ain't? Is this the fog or smog? Cause there's a difference when you breathe it in. So don't let the corporate media take you for a spin. This that morning show, they put you in the know. So I hope that you ready. All we do is go, go, go. Yeah, come get your info, you gon' be like, whoa. Hair of the dog, we bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Speeding the facts.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me here on this Monday edition of Hair of the Dog. I am solo today, so I'm going to rely on your comments, critiques, information you want to share, any complaints, things that I might say that you disagree with. Join the conversation. We are live this morning. My lovely and talented co-host Andy is enjoying an anniversary trip in the wilds of Canada and can't get internet. So today we are just solo, but we do have a lot of information to cover, and I will try to keep it as light as possible. But things that are happening today on this Monday in August, not necessarily good. So we'll get through it together. But first, let's cover some breaking news that happened in Kenosha yesterday. And some of you may be waking up to the information. Kenosha is a little bit of an hour away from me, and it's really a very nice community. However, like almost all communities here in the United States, we do have our issues. So if we don't deal with them, they come out in some very epic ways. And what we saw was a gentleman who on Sunday evening was called in to break up a fight. This gentleman's name is Jacob Blake. Jacob was called in to stop up a fight between two women. No clue yet as to who these two women are, but no good deed goes unpunished. When the police arrived for this domestic dispute, Jacob ended up being shot in the back 7 times. So if you've seen the very graphic video that has been circulating, it was posted on Facebook, you would see that the officers were following Jacob as he tried to enter his car, a car where 3 of his children were, 3 small boys. Officers fired 7 shots at near point blank range into this gentleman's back. So let's clarify for a second here. I didn't see anything on the video that warrants a death sentence. And if I'm wrong on that, let me know. I need to understand a little bit better how defying a police officer to get to your children is a death sentence now. It should be due process. It should be de-escalation techniques and all of this. So the other thing I want to kind of cover on this particular story as information is coming out is why are we seeing the Facebook video before we're seeing actual video from the police officers through body cameras. So real quick, I'm going to put up the article that's circulating this morning, and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. So as of this morning, the Department of Justice is going to conduct the investigation into the actions of the Kenosha police officers. So it goes into a little bit of detail about who this gentleman was. All it says is domestic dispute, and Jacob was involved in it in some way, shape, or form. Witnesses are saying that he actually was trying to break up the fight. So when police arrived, rather than doing their investigation, they confronted him. And we'll get more details, hopefully, as the Department of Justice rolls out more information on this. But what was interesting to me is it said that the police officers initially weren't wearing body cameras. So that seemed a little bit incongruent with what I know about Kenosha. Like I said, I live about an hour away from there. So what I looked up was, well, most police departments already have a body cameras. And what I saw from Kenosha in particular was Kenosha back in 2017, their police department put in a request with the state to get clarification on body cameras and whether they should be used them. The way that inquiry was raised, it looked like Kenosha didn't want to actually use the body cameras. They were worried about liability and legality of it. Well, in 2017, the state legislature gave them the clarification that they asked for, and required them to wear them. So prior to that, they had also been beneficiaries of equipment from the military. So the military was using basically wholesale garage sale type of activity to get rid of some of their unwanted materials. So Kenosha, the police department, real small community, got a helicopter and I believe it was 63 assault weapons and some other materials from the military. So they also had body cameras, because we can see in other incidences that body cameras were used. In fact, there was one incident that happened just this past May. There was, make sure I get his name correctly, a business owner, Gus Harris. Gus Harris, longtime resident of Kenosha, who's a business owner. He owns the Flex and Burn gym in Kenosha. What happened to Gus was one morning he was out jogging and he was parking his car near his business, and a police officer rolled up on him. The police officer, who was wearing a body camera, and that video was immediately released, that officer confronted Gus and asked about what he was doing and this sort of thing. And when it was revealed that Gus was just jogging, this is where he always parks, this sort of thing, the officer just kind of laughed and said, well, someone called our line and said that there was a suspicious vehicle circling the parking lot, and the person driving that vehicle was wearing a ski mask, and they read off your license plate. So Gus, being a smart individual, said, well, if this person could see my license plate, they could also see that I have not been wearing a mask, and they called you out here just for racial profiling, which is exactly what the officer agreed had happened. So we know that Kenosha has been wearing body cameras, that police department has been wearing body cameras for a while. So what I'd like to see now with this Blake case is, what does the body camera show? And we can see clearly from the Facebook video that the officers in question in this particular case were following with him. He just was not complying with their order to stop. That is not a capital crime in any way, shape, or form. So as of this morning, you can see all over social media, the Blue Lives Matter people are out there trying to justify this shooting, and there is no way by law to justify this shooting. What we have is, I'm not a lawyer, but what we have is yet again justifying lethal force against a tax-paying citizen. So predictably, Wisconsin and Kenosha had some pretty severe protests and rioting overnight. They did impose a curfew at 10, I think it was 10:30 p.m. Made announcements that there were unlawful assemblies and, you know, just the nature of everything that's happening. But we look for more coming out, and definitely our thoughts and prayers are with Jacob Blake and his family. Right now he's in ICU. It's likely he will recover, but you know, still we send our thoughts, prayers, which is never nearly enough in a case like this, but we hope for justice for Jacob Blake and his family, and then his young children who are in the backseat. We hope that they're okay. We hope that they get the support that they need and will need after a traumatizing event. No child should ever have to witness their parent being shot, or, you know, in the case of Philando Castile, murdered in front of them. So that is what's going on in Wisconsin and Kenosha this morning, and we will keep you up to date on that information. So yeah. The other thing that we're looking at is folks in New Orleans who are right now undergoing a hurricane that's been since downgraded to a tropical storm. So this is Marco, and I want to bring this up real quick because there are a couple things that I want to talk about when it comes to climate change, and here we're seeing it here. So I had posted this. I've been watching this storm for a couple days because I have a personal love for New Orleans, having been there several times. But most people are not aware that New Orleans sits below sea level in kind of a bowl. And the last time that we had Hurricane Katrina, we were kind of up on the geography and why this city in particular was at risk. So here we have an interesting effect, and I had to look this up, Fujiwara effect. This is where you have two storms in proximity to each other, and the spin of the storms are playing off each other. We actually had that happen for the first time in over a century. And that was with Marco and Laura. So Marco is hitting New Orleans right now. And Laura is expected to follow that same trajectory path, but veer towards Houston and then up here towards Illinois towards the end of the week. So this is part of the effect that we're watching. And as I was looking at this sort of information, I started looking at other pieces of data that are going on here on this bright and cheery Monday morning. So we have hurricanes here. One interesting fact for those who are still in denial about the effects of climate change. So meteorologists are looking at these two named storms, and Laura, they point to Laura. This is the first L. For those who aren't familiar, every time we have a named storm, they pick the next letter of the alphabet. And in August, this is the first time that we've reached the L, which is the 12th named storm so far. Usually by this time, we're actually at, we don't hit the 12th till November, but we are still very early in the season. The season runs until November. The other point that meteorologists are looking at right now is this is the third hurricane level storm, Marco, and Laura is expected to be the fourth, happening in August. Those don't usually happen this fast in the season, and we usually don't get to that level within a hurricane season. So it's just an amazing turn of events just with these storms in areas that can least afford it, right? So it's gone through Puerto Rico, it's gone through Cuba, right through New Orleans twice, all during a pandemic. So that was the hurricane. And then the other thing that I want to touch on is the wildfires. So I brought up this map to show, you can see in the western part of the United States, we have a number of unchecked fires that are going on. We know that California, for the first time in history, we had the Weather Service issue a warning for a tornado, a fire tornado. That's never happened. Well, these storms are still, the firestorms are still raging in California and in Colorado. Both areas hit with drought and as well as a blight from other pests and things with their tree line, killing their trees, creating this just perfect storm of events that will affect the wildfire season in California. The other thing that is interesting, and this is where COVID kind of keeps up, we've already seen in California where they don't have enough firefighters from neighboring states helping out with them. And they don't have enough of the prison labor as well, because those prisoners have been hit with COVID and a lot of them are sick and suffering and contagious. So you have environmental effects plus health effects in California right now. And then to top all that off, why are we having the wildfires? Same thing that was happening in Australia. If you look at this map, this is the drought map that is happening right now. And you can see some of these areas are a little bit predictable, but they're seriously in the red where it's detrimental to the environment, to the people that live there, the people who live there, livestock farms, things like that. But what I wanted to point out here with this particular map is if you look over to the right, this is the Midwest. And if you can see the red space in Iowa, so from Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, we're having not quite drought, but a reduction in rain. And the reason I want to highlight that is because this area is considered the breadbasket of the United States. Illinois alone produces enough food to feed the United States twice. But those areas that are having the reduced rainfall and preceding drought-like conditions, They produce the food for the United States. So what I thought was interesting, and this is something we'll continue to monitor for the Midwest, is when you think back to the Arab Spring, in Egypt in particular, that was sparked by the cost of rice and grains skyrocketing because they were going through a drought. And here in the United States, we have a situation where not only do we have these environmental effects, but at the same time, we have the effects of COVID. And right now, states have lifted the rent and mortgage moratorium. It was not a rent forgiveness. So whatever rents you weren't able to pay in the preceding months now become due. And on top of that, we have water evictions happening here in Illinois and in other states. So governors have not put a stop to evictions that are caused because you cannot pay your water bill. So we have 10% unemployment, the extra unemployment benefits that have been reduced. We have a number of people who are already suffering through hunger situations, and we've already seen lines at our food banks. So all of these things are converging, and this is what we talked about here on the network. Andy and I talked about many times, was that we could see this bubble kind of growing, where it was food insecurity, rent insecurity, home insecurity, and then we ended the CARES Act, and Congress took a break without doing anything else. And even in the Washington Post this morning, they talked about how all of these situations are converging to create an episode that is far worse than anything we've seen before. Far worse than a recession, far worse than the Great Depression, all of these things converging. And we need to put it all in perspective. So the hope was that leadership would take all of these things to mind and start planning for the future. So this is where we're going to pivot just a little bit and talk about the DNC convention and then their platform that came out. Because some of the things that we saw over the past week was reaching across the aisle. They called it a unity kind of event where we were appealing to past Republican governors, past Republican figures, all of us joined together to defeat Trump. But the policy positions that came out from it were kind of sketchy. So one of the comments that I want to bring up here is a former Chicago mayor and former key staffer for the Obama administration, Rahm Emanuel. So here you can see Rahm Emanuel with his blanket statement. Two things I would say if I was advising the Biden administration, which he is, he's on the transition team: no Green New Deal and no Medicare for all. So this is the problem that we are going to face as progressives, and I just want a point of clarity here. Progressives are people that come from all across the political spectrum. This is not far left. It's actually center policy because it's fiscally sound, socially responsible policy. So when you look at something like the Green New Deal, when we're talking about investing in our infrastructure, investing in new technology so that we can once again be the intellectual capital of the world, that we can compete with a global marketplace where Germany is getting 90+% of their energy from renewables, where all of these countries are already meeting the challenges and going further, and we are still stuck in 1980s planning and infrastructure. So this is where we had hope that the DNC would actually rise to the occasion. It's got to be about more than just Trump bad. So give people something to vote for, or what we're going to do is, if Biden said things won't fundamentally change, then we're going to have a major problem. It won't be just brown and black people. It will be all of us together suffering through all of this. And while we're going through situations like we see with Jacob Blake, overt racism, how much more is that going to be a problem for all of us when we actually have resources dwindling, when we have higher food prices, when we have more people suffering because they don't have access to care. And what we're seeing from the DNC is exactly that. They are kind of turning a blind eye to it. So this is where I wanted to talk about a little bit on the what they're doing with the plan here. So this came out of the DNC. And what happens every 4 years when there's a convention is they do a new DNC platform. So if anyone had looked up the DNC platform in 2016, and I'll post that link here, I want you to compare it to the new platform that is being unveiled by the DNC. Real quick. Hi, Mike. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so Mike says, I just want to say I'm disappointed in the people that name tropical storms. One named Marco. How could you not name the other one Polo? Well, Mike, the reason is they've got to go in order. So the next one had to start with an L. But I like the way you're thinking. Hopefully we won't get to a P level tropical storm this year, but yeah, we're on track for it. So hopefully we will have that. And the other link that I'm posting right now is the current DNC platform. This is the 2020 platform, and this is being circulated and distributed. So compare the two, and what we can see here is that during this epic event of not only a global pandemic where they're saying that no public option, no Medicare for all, we can't possibly do that. At the same time, they removed the language about ending fossil fuel subsidies. So Biden's campaign had to come back out and say, oh, no, Biden is all for ending those subsidies. At the same time, he's going to fundraisers held by these fossil fuel CEOs and lobbyists. So what I thought was interesting is this is The Verge, and whether you like The Verge or not, all of the information that is in this article is vetted and true. So it was just a handy one that I could put up here. But what I thought that I wanted to call out here is fossil fuel subsidies cost the U.S. between 20 and 649 billion each year. So this is the money that we are spending to prop up an industry that is actively working on creating the effects of climate change right now. So we're seeing the drought conditions, we're seeing the fire, we're seeing the hurricanes. These are externality costs that you and I as taxpayers bear for the activity of the products and services that they distribute. So we're in a catch-22 as consumers. I can't yet afford an electric vehicle. I can't yet take that electric vehicle and use it in the way intended because the infrastructure simply isn't there. It's getting better, but it's not there. And at the same time, federal dollars are being spent to prop up the industries that I am going to have to pay the cost for. Like if you're in New Orleans right now, you're paying a very high price for the cost of climate change. And then if you're in New Orleans and all of these in Texas, and you're dealing with all of the effects of climate change, and you work for the fossil fuel industry, you are now in a catch-22 for your household. So this is why the infrastructure change and something like the Green New Deal is so critical, because that takes our federal dollars and shifts it from the addictive forces of fossil fuel and puts it into green renewables so that the family who is relying on the paycheck from the oil industry can get a paycheck for sustainable fuel industry and building roads and bridges and all the things that we desperately need. That will come from the federal dollars instead of out of your pocket. Look at California, same thing, right? So this is why Rahm Emanuel is absolutely wrong on something like the Green New Deal. And I don't care what you call it. This is a federal investment in us, in our country, instead of in corporations with limited effect for the people that they are supposed to serve. So in the corner here that I put out is a call out from the convention and the 2020 policy. So what they are looking at is going to the Paris Accord. And I just want to remind everyone that climate scientists have said that the Paris Accord was 20 years too late. But what they do say that is a positive is they are looking at investments for making programs like youth, I forget what they called it, but it used to be some sort of group under Kennedy where they would go and work on environmental things, go to national parks, go to communities, and do build. That is part of the federal jobs guarantee. So while I looked up Joe Biden's platform and I looked up the DNC platform, hidden in there is language that gives me just a little bit of hope, because I know that Stephanie Kelton and I'm going to butcher her last name, Pavlina, I'll post it. It's too early on a Monday. But the federal jobs guarantee and the Green New Deal are sort of talked about in that policy. And it is my present hope that the reason it's buried is because the DNC is trying so hard to cater to Republicans. And they have not invested the time and energy to explain what these policies actually are. And that's part of the problem. Well, we have such a divide. So we will do a better job here on our network explaining what the federal jobs guarantee is, sharing that information, and maybe we can get Pavlina on the program later to actually talk about what the federal jobs guarantee is so that you can understand it. So rather than having 10% unemployment, 15% unemployment, our target is 0. And what we're seeing now is in other countries where they have targeted 0 for unemployment, it's working beautifully for their economy, for their small businesses, for families. So that is something that I'm very hopeful for. So just take a real quick check here on comments. Okay, so yeah, Mike is saying that that is a massive range, 20 to 645 billion. The reason why it's such a massive range is because the data. So depending on which data you choose to look at and which year you choose to look at, some of it is actually hidden. So it's hard to pinpoint it down. We know that the upper band is 645 billion. So is it a straight subsidy, or are you giving them a subsidy and a tax breaks? How do you quantify that? So we know that like Exxon, in some years they have paid an effective tax rate of 0 and then gotten money back on top of it. So and then Jeffrey, good morning Jeffrey. He says, please read Pavlina's A Job Guarantee. And I'm actually going to see if I can find that, find either a video or a synopsis of it, and we can post it across our network and make sure that everybody understands what the job guarantee is. What I like about it is in my local community, I get to decide with my neighbors what a job is. So if you're staying at home with your children and you have to turn into a de facto teacher, is that a job? I say yes, it is, because you're keeping me safe, you're keeping your children safe. My future depends on the health and well-being of your children. So yes, I think that that is something that should be compensated. Are you in a family where one person has to stay home and take care of an elderly family member? That's a job. Are you somebody who's disabled, and if you went to work for corporate America, could legally be paid $3 an hour? Or can you spend maybe an hour or 2 helping to plant flowers in our community and beautify parks? It's a job. So a lot of the way that we look at work would change. And when I brought up the information about droughts and fires and hurricanes, obviously we have a vested need in rethinking the way we do a whole lot of things. And it's really not that hard. So for example, I've been doing research on these drought-stricken states. A lot of them are controlled by Republicans. Well, especially on the left, we like to think that Republicans are all climate change deniers, and that is not true. In fact, if you start looking at these states, in particular, I'm looking at New Mexico, Nevada, parts of Texas, they're actually doing things to combat climate change in some very simple ways. Very simple ways. And one of the programs that I think is just delightful and so effective is in Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, Nevada. They've done something as simple as changing out toilets. Old toilets were using about 30 gallons of water in a month, and they reduced it down to just a few gallons per month for a typical family by providing subsidies or free upgraded new toilets. And in New Mexico alone, because they gave out 100,000 new upgraded toilets, they have reduced water consumption by 40%. That's huge, especially when we're looking at droughts and everything from the Colorado River to the Rio Grande, the reduced water capacity. So in Colorado alone, where you saw an explosion of new population growth, water usage has actually reduced with one small change. So for our neighbors on the right who are still paying attention to corporate media talking about climate change as a hoax, or they're going to take away your truck with a V8 engine, not true. What we're talking about are very small changes that we can make that actually affect everything. And we saw this in real time when we did have a brief period of shutdown because of COVID. We saw that the air quality had dramatically improved. We saw that water quality dramatically improved. And so these are small changes we can make to duplicate that kind of activity that we saw during a brief shutdown period. So if there are any questions about climate change, you still think it's kind of a hoax, it's not going to affect you, you've not noticed higher grocery prices at the stores, I want to know, what do you think? Are we off base here? Is this something that just really is kind of a marketing gimmick? Okay, so Jeffrey wants to talk about the U.S. Postal Service. He says, just as, okay, so let me back up. Jeff says, there are several things that need to be done in your community that won't make a profit, so it will never be covered by the private sector. And that's absolutely true. So that goes back to a little bit of a libertarian argument where if you just allow the corporations to do it, they'll do it because it benefits them. Well, we've never seen that with roads. We've never seen that. What you see is, for those of us who work in snow in the winter, I mean substantial snow, and you've ever had trouble with your car wouldn't start, or the roads were impassable, how many times did you have a supervisor say to you, well, I got here, why can't you? That is the voice of the company telling you that if I can do it, you can do it as an individual. So this is kind of blows that libertarian argument out of the water. If there's no profit in it, they're not going to do it. They won't even do it to benefit their own bottom line in many cases. So why would you expect them to do it with public use? And Jeffrey goes on to say, just as the U.S. Postal Service is a necessary service that doesn't need you to make a profit. And I love that, because today continues the hearings in Washington in the House Judiciary Committee about the changes that are being made at the post office. And Trump himself has actually tweeted that the changes to the post offices are meant to bolster his election bid. That is illegal. That is unconstitutional, and it's actually written into the Constitution that you cannot do that. So that's why there are hearings going on right now. And what we're seeing is reports from local postal workers who are defying orders and reconnecting the sorting machines because you had such an outcry for this, where it all goes back together. A number of people, our seniors and our veterans, are getting sick and dying because they don't have their medication. So what we had was, over the last 10 years, a push from the insurance companies, for-profit insurance companies, to get people to get their medications through the mail in a 90-day supply. Well, when the Postal Service started to shut down and things started to back up, those people weren't getting their medications. And these are life-saving medications. So here you had the convergence of Trump's policies just in a re-election bid to make sure that the post office wasn't functioning properly, affecting our veterans, affecting our seniors, affecting everybody, right? So we still have people who have not received their CARES check, that $1,200 check. That is still an issue. And all of these things are kind of converging. They all affect each other. This is why progressive policy is laid out to address all of these convergences and work together. They work together to create value for the economy. It actually works to bolster our GDP. Something like Medicare alone is damn near guaranteed to raise GDP 5% every year. 5% GDP growth. That is phenomenal growth. And so when we're talking about going to a program like Medicare for All, where we would affect Americans who work in a for-profit industry. So let me quantify that. There are 400,000 Americans who work in the for-profit health insurance industry. Some of those people would be affected because of going to Medicare for All. And this is where the federal jobs guarantee comes in. They would get paid training, they would get career guidance, and to be able to change. You are not your job. If you're a minimum wage analyst on a call center in the US, timed down to the second by how you interact with a customer, that is not who you are. That is the job that you do. But we can take that skill set and train you into a livable wage job. And all of that is part and parcel to the federal jobs guarantee and Medicare for All together. So now we have 400,000 Americans retrained, working on something that benefits their community as a whole. And we take out the middleman of the for-profit insurance company, and everyone gets the same level of care from zero to death, and it doesn't matter what you do for a living. If you're a congressman, you're not worth more than the people that you're supposed to serve. So this is where all of it goes together, which is why I wanted to start with Mr. Blake and the racism issues, because racism comes from insecurity. It comes from a feeling of weakness. It comes from believing the lie that our resources are limited when they are not. And then we extend it out to climate change and all the things that are happening that we, the taxpayers, are paying the externality costs for. And then it also goes into what our leaders are thinking about. So we have a Rahm Emanuel, and we have all of these other people who are advising the Biden campaign, not listening to the people, not understanding what's going on, and certainly not reading the room about what we as ordinary citizens are going through. And then, of course, on the other side, you have Trump, who I still can't figure out if he really wants to get reelected or if he's just going through the motions, because it's one bad statement, one bad policy after another. Hence what we saw this weekend with the Conway family. So I'm not going to pull apart Kellyanne Conway and her husband, their relationship, but what we saw, and I feel my heart goes out to her, their daughter, who is a minor, she called for personal emancipation. And I'm not sure if she's actually working with a legal team to go through with this, or if making the threat to her parents was enough. Her father works for the Lincoln Project. Her mother, as we know, works at the White House. And she herself has espoused left-leaning views. So here's the problem when you're the child of two high-profile politicos. no matter which side they're on, you're going to get the brunt of it. So she herself has put out a personal tweet that kind of called to mind what a child is going through in this climate. So it's hard enough for us as adults to kind of get the backlash on social media. She as a child was getting it from both her parents. So now we saw Kellyanne step away from the White House, say that she's going to resign and will be back, I'm sure, in some capacity. And then her father step away from the Lincoln Project. So, oh boy, there was a lot going on this weekend. Yeah, so any other comments or questions before I get out of here this morning? So, okay. Mike, who himself is a veteran, says, honoring our veterans is nothing but lip service. If you don't need to look any further than the 4th of July. People who say thank a vet are often the same people that ignore the requests from PTSD veterans about fireworks. And that's absolutely true. Absolutely true. How many times, and we've got a Memorial Day holiday coming up, how many times have you seen a politician or public figure front and center to be out there for a photo op, but then their voting and what they are actually fighting for has very little to do with the rhetoric. One person that I call out at every opportunity is Democratic State Representative Democratic House Representative Bill Foster in Illinois' 17th Congressional District. He himself voted with Republicans to gut the Americans with Disability Act. So what he voted for in that respect was, if a disabled person, including a disabled vet, has trouble accessing a service because they have not been in compliance with the ADA, they have to personally come up with the funds to sue that business or that entity in order to make that change. And as Andy and I have covered many times on this particular show, having different lawyers, defense, prosecutors, gentleman who's running for state Supreme Court, they have all said the same thing. Justice is only for those who can afford it. It's not blind. It's definitely looking at your net worth. So as a disabled person, particularly a disabled vet, you are typically on the lower end of the income scale. You're trying to survive. You can't get your medications. It's hard enough to get VA servicing because we cut their benefits, cut their funding so much that now we are offering to veterans UI benefits that are certificates for them to use services elsewhere, typically under Medicaid, not Medicare, Medicaid, and then we cut Medicaid benefits. So when we say we value and honor our veterans, we're lying. Absolutely. And that's across the board. And I think I choose to believe it's because as Americans, we don't understand the cause and effect, and we don't understand how all of these things work together. So when Biden says that he's going to expand the public option and he points to Medicaid, the problem is in a county like mine, that is typical of a lot of counties around this country, there are 0 providers for Medicaid. 0. Nobody will take that insurance. Hospitals or doctors. And the reason for that is we cut the reimbursement rates for doctors so they lose money by servicing a Medicaid contract. So under Joe Biden's plan, you would get a piece of paper that does nothing for you. You would have access to Medicaid, but you couldn't actually go see a doctor. And then for the disabled people or disabled vets and all of this, we don't have an infrastructure that allows them to go to another county or another area to see a physician. So this is, again, where cause and effect and convergence of things play together. We don't have good public transport. We don't have good transport or services for the disabled. And we certainly don't have the Postal Service to help veterans, nor do we fund the VA or give them access to quality care. How's your Monday going? So So you can see why I had a little bit of a dour um, outlook as we started the program this morning, but I don't want to leave you on a down note before we get out of here this morning. I want to say that the same thing that we've said before, and I need you to believe it. None of these are unfixable. None of these are issues that we cannot fix together. We need politicians to get out of the way and actually do their job. The core of their job is to listen to their constituents. Right now, they're listening to the donors, and that's part of the problem. So while we start to see the DNC platform come out, I want you to remember that the DNC's platform from 2016 was far more progressive than what they've come out with in 2020. But they never listened to the one in 2016. So the one in 2020 is kind of lip service too. This is why it's so important for you to hold your local representative accountable. That is your senator and your congressperson, and then your state reps too. So I know we've got less than 100 days till the general election. And with that, I want you to take a look at your down ballot races. Once again, I am not going to dictate who you vote for. I'm not going to vote shame, and I will strongly push against vote shaming at the top of the ticket. But I don't want you to forget what's going on down ballot, and that we have over 265 progressives who have won their primary, and those people can go on to the general and be successful if you vote down ballot. So if you need to skip that top race, I get it. If you need to vote your conscience, I get it. Vote down ballot. And the statistics are out there. You can look them up at your local county clerk, your state office. Most people pay attention just to the top race and don't vote for those key races below. So this election, we need the opposite. We need you to focus on those down ballot races, and we can really affect some change. So even though the likes of Debbie Wasserman Schultz just passed her primary, we can nullify her voice and her bullshit rhetoric by getting enough progressives into Congress and enough progressives into state races. So with that, I want to thank everybody who weighed in this morning, Jeffrey, Mike in particular. Thank you so much for your input, and for everyone else. If this is the first time you're catching our show, we're here Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I think Andy will be back Wednesday, if not maybe Friday, or maybe he's going to go be a mountain man somewhere in the wilds of Canada, chasing down beaver and geese or whatever. But thank you so much for tuning in, and I'm going to leave this morning with an ad that we put together for Neo Citizens. If you're not aware of who Neo Citizens is, it is a group that has rebuilt and is in beta for a social platform that gets rid of the fascists. So it's just progressives from around the world meeting together in a social utility that is just phenomenal. They also put together this fundraising program for the ACLU and a number of really great charities, including our network, that funds their development as well as some of the good work we're doing. So take a look at this, and then I'm going to get out of here, and I will see you back here on Wednesday. Thank you so much.
Neo Citizens is launching something truly special. They are building a global community for progressives. We know that being a progressive isn't about where you come from, but where your heart is. We seek truth and make decisions based on empathy, science, and a deeper economic understanding that prioritizes investment in people and our planet. We know that together we can create a better future for everyone, and now you can be a part of history in the making. Neo Citizens has launched a groundbreaking new project. Trump's Wall of Shame joins voices from across the globe to demonstrate that we are truly in this together. He couldn't build his wall of hate, but we can build our wall and help leading progressive causes too. Digital Liberation Front is proud to partner with Neo-Citizens, recognized for our commitment to progressive ideals of independent journalism, dispelling misinformation, and for living the message as the nation's first employee-owned, all-union media company. Join us and help build this wall.